Musketeers' motto, young man, is one for all and all for one, which loosely translated means 10 for him, 10 for him, 10 for you, and 10 for me. My dear Aramis needs 10 to impress his latest mistress. My good Porthos needs 10 to enable himself to dress decently. And you need 10 for lodgings and a servant, I would suggest. And I...
And you?
I need a drink. You will find, young man, that the future looks rosier through the bottom of a glass.
Welcome to the Cinematic Flashback podcast. Get ready to hop into the Wayback Machine as we journey through the wild, bold, and unforgettable films of the 1970s. Each episode, we break down a classic movie or forgotten gem by exploring the who's who of each film, diving into the premise and plot, seeing how it performed then and now, and wrapping things up by asking, did it groove through the decades or did it lose its beat? Today, we're unsheathing our swords for Richard Lester's 1973 adventure, The Three Musketeers, a witty, action-packed take on the classic tale of courage, courtly intrigue, and swashbuckling style. Joining me for this episode is David Wright, aka Deaf Dave. David is a veteran video producer with an award-winning career that has spanned broadcasting, cable advertising, live events, documentaries, and even the Department of Defense. He's also the creator and co-host of the Apples and Oranges podcast, the host of American Soccer Quick Kicks on YouTube, and author of Galahad's Doom fantasy trilogy. A true child of the 80s with a love of pop culture, David is also a fan of Atlanta United, the Georgia Bulldogs, and large Oreo milkshakes. David, welcome to the Flashback.
Thanks, Chuck. I am a huge fan of your show. I've been listening from the very beginning, and I am excited to be here with you today.
Well, Dave, I've been hoping to get you on at some point. It took me a little while to get it scheduled in. You're a very busy guy. You are on so many podcasts, and you got your American Soccer Quick Kicks. How did you come up with Apples and Oranges?
Last year, my son, who was 17 and turned 18 during the show, we did a limited run, Apples and Oranges. It lasted about 7 months. It's Beatles versus Beach Boys show that steps through the decade of the 60s, pairing their albums up against each other 1v1 in a very surely you can't be serious format. You know, I'd come up with the idea a couple years earlier and we let it lie. And then randomly, at least a year later, Jackson says, "Dad, remember that idea we had? I think we should do it." And I was like, if your teenager comes up to you and says he wants to do a project with you, you say yes. And so
Absolutely.
We had a good time spending all those weeks and months working on that together. And I think as time goes by and he gets older, that's going to be a time capsule that will continue to just become more and more precious for us.
Why the Three Musketeers?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a vague childhood memory. I have had it fixed in my mind since I was little that there were Three Musketeer movies in the 70s that set the standard. And everything else has been second rate. I just remember them. If this came out in 73, I was only 2 years old. There's no way I saw it when it was new. Mm-hmm. My dad must have had it on when it broadcast on TV one night. He was always a fan of swashbuckling adventures. If a movie had swords in it, he was probably a fan of it. I just remember this made an impression on me as a kid. I had not seen it in a very long time. I had been tracking it on all the free streaming services, and it wasn't available anywhere for a long time, but I had it reserved if it ever came up. And it did become available early in the year on Tubi and probably a couple other places. And so I think that's when I reached out to, I was like, he's doing a 70s show. He's got to talk about this. And so I've now seen it again for the first time in probably close to 50 years.
So before we talk more about this, let's have a listen to the trailer.
The Three Musketeers, the most read book in the world after the Bible. Filmed with a cast that dazzles the screen with their brilliant performances.
There are 6 of them, and we are only 3.
No. 4.
What is your name, youngster?
D'Artagnan.
Athos, Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan. Forward!
One for all for one. The action.
You want to sleep with me. You need a good cuddle. Chase the fights away.
The romance.
Oh, Monsieur D'Artagnan. Oh.
The excitement. the suspense. The Three Musketeers, a truly great film adventure.
Your Majesty refers to God?
I refer to Cardinal Richelieu, which is not quite the same thing. Ah, Cardinal.
Up, Cardinal. Down, Queen.
The spectacle, the splendor, the thrill. The genius of Alexander Dumas, the brilliance of Richard Lester. One great screen entertainment. The Three Musketeers. One mighty cast, a dazzling motion picture. Oliver Reed, Raquel Welch, Richard Chamberlain, Michael York, Frank Finlay, Christopher Lee, Geraldine Chaplin, Jean-Pierre Cassel, Simon Ward, Faye Dunaway, and Charlton Heston in The Three Musketeers.
So, Dave, did you realize that The Three Musketeers was not only a critical and commercial success, we could call it a blockbuster from 1973?
I don't think I was consciously aware of the extent of its success, but I did know they were very popular and well received. I was familiar with the idea that they immediately did a sequel the next year called The Four Musketeers, which for a long time bothered me. I was like, they're messing with the source material, making up Four Musketeers. I found out the details. One thing I can say about these movies is that it's actually fairly faithful to the original novel. I knew that there was The Return of the Musketeers, which happened in the late 80s, largely the same cast and crew. And I knew that The Man in the Iron Mask was by the same author, set in the same world, and had a few adaptations. So I just kind of, from a distance, was always kind of interested in the idea of the Three Musketeers. And I always knew that these, from the early 70s, they were like the Musketeer movies. They were so good and so popular that, at least from an American adaptations, it was kind of all left alone for a long time.
When you first recommended this film, I'm not sure how excited I was about it.
Okay.
I have seen versions of The Three Musketeers before, but I know I had never seen this one. Michael York can be serious and he can be comedic. And right from the start of this film opens up with this incredible sword fight between D'Artagnan and his father. And it immediately goes to leaving his little village, going to the big city. He's a country bumpkin. His mother's basically telling him, don't forget to wash behind your ears. Make sure you put on clean underclothing and whatnot. He switches from being a swordsman to being this young, naive boy going into the big city. It was very funny.
Be a musketeer. You're young, you should be brave. You are a Gascon and a D'Artagnan. So fight whenever you can. Never submit to insults, except from the king and the Cardinal Richelieu. Now be wary of the Cardinal, for he rules France through the king. But you are a king's man, and the queen's. So, now, go and say goodbye to your mother.
The ointment is in the valleys. Rub it well into every scratch. And dry your cloak and your shoes well.
Yes, Mother. Goodbye. Goodbye, Father.
Aye. Don't sell the horse. Let him die honorably of old age. And fight, remember.
So this film had a rather large budget of $4.5 million, and it brought back about $10 million. When adjusted for inflation, that's a domestic box office take of over $200 million. It was produced by 3 generations of producers from a single family. Have you ever heard of the Salkinds?
Yes, I believe I have.
If you've ever watched Superman, Superman 2, Superman 3, okay, Supergirl, and Superboy, the TV series, you'll know the name Alexander, Ilya, and Michael Salkind. And all 3 of these were producers on this film, but it was primarily Alexander Salkind running the show. Were there any other movies from the Salkinds that you remembered?
Yes, they did Santa Claus the movie in 1985. Which I actually enjoy that one quite a bit. I think the first part of that movie is a pretty good origin story for Santa Claus. And then it goes into a plot about toys and saving Christmas. It's got Dudley Moore as an elf. I like it. It's entertaining.
Both the Three Musketeers and its sequel, The Four Musketeers, were originally a single film. However, they decided to release it as two films. Charlton Heston said, well, they got two for the price of one. The actors were not happy, because they signed a contract for one film, not two. There's money that should be involved in exchanging hands, and they weren't getting it. This created what is now known in SAG as the Salkind rule. On every contract, there's a Salkind rule that basically requires producers to specify how many films that are being made so the actors can be fairly compensated. Who knew?
You mentioned that $4.5 million budget. I wonder, is that for both movies? Did they basically get Four Musketeers done for free after that budget was incorporated into the
I think they did. I think that was all inclusive. They did another movie like that once, right?
The Salkinds did?
Yeah, didn't they do Superman and Superman 2?
Yeah, a lot of Superman 2 was shot at the same time. I don't know if they were able to finish it, but I don't think they were being sneaky with that one. I don't think they could be.
No.
But, you know, you've already recovered your whole budget with the first movie, and you're not paying the actors anymore, and you're not paying your crew anymore, and you have a whole nother movie to put out in theaters as a sequel to something that was very popular. I'm sure that was very lucrative for them, and I'm sure that if allowed to get away with that again, they would have continued that tactic. Why wouldn't you? It's a lot of profit margin on that second movie. The choice to make it two came late. They didn't go in to the production thinking that way, but they changed their minds later. I guess they were able to cut the first one in a way to give it its own ending. When I said they're already messing with the original source material, oh, okay, this is Hollywood doing it. Four Musketeers now. Not really. It was the same story. You know, they just split it in two. But now you get, say, Four Musketeers because of D'Artagnan.
So you do have, at the end of the Three Musketeers, it wraps up rather suddenly. There's some plot threads that haven't quite been closed up yet. And everything is ending on this nice high note. You're just going, that's it? And then there's a title card that says, no, the Three Musketeers are coming back. And then they show some clips from the upcoming movie, which I'm like, how did they already have the clips for the movie? Was this added for video features later on? But no, they already had the film pretty much in the can. So
yeah, and it's common now to shoot more than one movie at once. Obviously, Lord of the Rings did it. I think Harry Potter, maybe Hunger Games. But you're having to be above board with it, and full disclosure, pay everybody fairly, all of that. It still makes sense economically for a studio to approach multiple films that way if they can see it in advance and know that's what they need to do. But you got to treat people right. The Salkind clause is relevant and is used. So yeah, the Three Musketeers basically forever changed standard Hollywood contracts.
We'll take a quick intermission here. Just enough time to grab some popcorn or top off your drink. You're listening to the Cinematic Flashback podcast. Stay tuned. The show continues right after this. And we're back. Hope you enjoyed that brief intermission. Now let's roll the next reel and get back into the conversation.
It turned out that the Salkinds and the director of this movie, Richard Lester, would go on to work later on Superman 2. Originally, the director of Superman and Superman 2 was, of course, Richard Donner. Somewhere there was a falling out. I think they had to, at some point, tie up production so that they could get Superman out in theaters. Something had happened, and they did not have Richard Donner complete the film. That's where Richard Lester came in. Lester has a little bit of a different eye than what Donner does. Lester has let's say, a more lighthearted view, and it's very much in evidence in The Three Musketeers. It's also evident in several of his other earlier works, A Hard Day's Night and Help.
I can see you're setting up Beatles, but I want to point out it's also evident in Superman 3. I mean, that one was all his, you know.
Oh, wait a minute. Did he do Superman 3?
Yes.
I did not know that. I did not look at my homework that far on that. I'm actually rather amazed.
So, yes, he was the director of both Beatles films, Hard Day's Night and Help. And those were movies that I watched during Apples and Oranges as a bit of research. So I can absolutely, especially with Hard Day's Night, see the same Lester DNA that's in Three Musketeers and the later Superman movies. I don't know if you had this later in your outline, but he had a couple of other movies from the 70s that stand out. He helmed Robin and Marion, which was a Robin Hood movie with Sean Connery. He also directed the prequel to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1979's Butch and Cassidy, The Early Years, that starred Tom Berenger and William Catt.
Oh, wow.
Instead of Paul Newman and Robert Redford.
George MacDonald Fraser was the screenplay writer, and The Three Musketeers was his first screenplay. And, it launched his career with, of course, The Four Musketeers. He wrote the James Bond film Octopussy and went on to do other films such as Red Sonja. David Watkins was the cinematographer. Do you remember a scene from a movie called Chariots of Fire? The slow motion runners on the beach.
Yeah, that's the scene. Yeah.
That's the scene, That is David Watkins.
Beautifully shot.
Michael Legrand was the composer, which he scored in just a week and a half.
I wonder if his short amount of time available to work on the score, how much of that was Lester being fairly loose with his production? I get the impression he's got a fairly loose style. And and maybe not as disciplined as other people working on the film, maybe like a composer would like for him to be. So I got more to say about how Lester reminds me of John Landis in a lot of ways, but I think that is an area where I sense that that's the case. And I would imagine that people that need time to do their job, I could see them being frustrated with a director like Lester, who is maybe just taking a loose approach to the production.
I'm not sure if there was a single cast member that I didn't necessarily like or felt was not good for the film. I have to go off and jump down to the bottom of the list because I want to talk about Faye Dunaway. And in this one, I don't think she has yet had her chance to shine. I'm hoping that in the sequel, we see more of her. What did you think of Faye Dunaway in this film?
I thought she was great. I would say this, there's a lot of big names throughout this cast. And it was one of the most interesting things about the movie is in almost every scene, I'm like, oh, it's that guy or that's her. It was truly, at least to a very large degree, truly an ensemble piece. I don't think anybody necessarily stood out. They all worked together very well. Everybody's checking their egos and just playing their role. I thought she was great as Milady de Winter. I could buy her as a conniving villainess. I haven't seen a whole lot of movies with her in it. I probably can name her big roles. I would say that she was great, just like everybody in this cast.
Was there anyone in this cast you found surprising, like, oh, wow, they're in this film?
I would say Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston is so American that it's interesting. He's playing Cardinal Richelieu. And yes. I guess he pulls it off, but with him, I never lost sight of the fact that it was Charlton Heston.
I think maybe one that might surprise people was Raquel Welch as Constance Bonacieux.
I'll just go ahead and tell you, most of my familiarity with Raquel Welch is from still images. But movies, I haven't actually watched a lot of her actual acting, and I didn't really know what to expect from her watching this movie, but she really went for it. She seemed to be having more fun with her role than anybody else, I think, was having.
I think so. I can tell you somebody else who stared at her picture quite a bit. That would be one Andy Dupree, who was imprisoned at the Shawshank Correctional Facility. He actually dug a hole and escaped, and he covered the hole with a poster of Raquel Welch from the film 1 Million Years BC. Yes. That was a classic poster.
Absolutely.
Oliver Reed was a very well-known person in England, just a celebrity that would have made all the headlines. But Athos is more quiet, more brooding, would you say?
That is who Athos is supposed to be. But I honestly didn't get that from Oliver Reed in this portrayal. He struck me as someone who lived life very broadly. I'm speaking of the character, not the actor. He was magnetic in this movie. He was easily my favorite musketeer and my favorite character in the movie, and he looked so cool. He made that costume work. I thought Oliver Reed was the coolest cat in the movie. And so I was drawn to him, and the idea that he's supposed to be the introvert and the quiet one, I just didn't get that. Maybe I focused on him too much, but it seemed to me that he had a very big presence in the movie where Frank Finlay as Porthos did not. That doesn't line up in my head, but I loved Oliver Reed in this movie. He was easily my favorite part of it.
I would say that of the three, Porthos, as portrayed by Frank Finlay, was more comic relief than anything. I just didn't quite get him as a master swordsman.
Yes, there's a lot of comic relief in this movie. In fact, I don't know if you can call it relief. There's just a lot of comedy.
Yes, yes. Frank Finlay actually had 2 roles in this film.
Yeah, I knew that one.
I couldn't find him.
I know, he's subtle.
Well, I ended up rewatching it again, and I sat through the credits to look. And he plays the jeweler who works for the Duke of Buckingham, who assists in replacing some valuables that were missing from Queen Anne's necklace. Is this your favorite Richard Chamberlain portrayal ever?
Well, it probably is. When I think of Richard Chamberlain, I think of the Musketeers, I think of Shogun, and I think of Alan Quatermain. And I was too young for Shogun to land with me. It kind of missed me. I know it was a huge deal when it was airing. My parents were all into it. I never personally got into it. And I don't remember if I saw the King Solomon Mine stuff when it first came out or not. But I know that when I did watch it, the most recent time, whenever that was, oh my Lord, I was struck by how completely awful that movie is.
Yes.
But
it's awful in a good way?
No, I can't see it. It's just, it's unwatchable to me. I thought it was, I don't know. I was extremely disappointed in that movie. So, yes, I think by default, I think Three Musketeers is my favorite Richard Chamberlain.
It has to be.
Yeah.
He was somewhat of the heartthrob on daytime television and in various made-for-TV movies. He's had quite a long career.
Yes, I think it's extremely well cast.
So when I was asking you about if there was any actor who was in here that maybe you're like, oh, I didn't know he was in here. For me, that was Christopher Lee.
That was my other answer, yeah.
Oh, my word. He plays Rochefort. And he's the most interesting person in this whole film, for me. Anytime that he's on screen, I'm locked in. I found him as a villain better than Charlton Heston.
Decided it is someone riding a buttercup. Unless it is a cheese with legs. I know what you laugh at, sir, and we will laugh together, if you speak to me. If you were a gentleman, I would speak to you. I was speaking at you, sir.
Oliver Reed would throw himself so much into his fighting that the stuntmen tended to get hurt. That happened to Christopher Lee, who looks at him and says, remember who first taught you how to fight with a sword? And that was them from an earlier production they did on the old Hammer films from the early 70s.
Wow, that's awesome. So, I'll go ahead and mention it here. One thing that Lester would do is he liked to shoot everything at once with multiple cameras. He would get the master shot and the close-ups all at the same time with multiple cameras.
Mm-hmm.
There's pros and cons to that. Actors, I'm sure, probably like the idea of being able to act the scene out at length and not have to worry about matching action for other angles that are picking up or whatever. And obviously, it reduces the number of setups you're doing in a day. On the negative side, you're probably not saving a whole lot of time with the setups because you're having to figure out how to block and light and keep your angles in such a way that the cameras aren't in each other's shots. You know, it becomes a lot more complicated. It does, I think, lend to more believable long shots and long sequences. But what it does is it limits your ability to use stuntmen for the principal actors. So these principals found themselves having to do a lot of their own fighting, a lot of their own horse riding, and there were a lot of injuries on this set. I think everybody at some point or another got hurt.
I think Oliver Reed got stabbed through the arm.
Oh, it's worse than that. He almost died.
Really?
In the scene where he's fighting and he gets caught on a water wheel and he gets lifted up off the ground, there's a shot where he's rotating around, and as he's coming back down low, his opponent strikes him with a sword right in the throat. And when I saw that happen in the movie, I flinched because I was like, oh. But obviously I'm thinking fake sword, whatever. And then I read up on the trivia, and no, that actually injured him in the throat, and he almost died.
Oh, my word.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when I say this guy reminds me of John Landis, what I mean is his safety standards seem very loose on set.
Yeah, that's definitely a throwback to the issues on the Twilight Zone
Well,
set.
Twilight Zone being the worst example, yes.
We'll pause here for just a moment. Think of it as a real change. Stick around, there's more cinematic flashback coming up right after this. And we're back. The lights are down, the film's rolling, and the final act begins. Let's jump back into the Cinematic Flashback podcast.
The last person that I really wanted to bring up was Roy Kinnear as Planchet, the manservant that D'Artagnan has hired to be his companion. He's the intentional comic relief. He was also in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He was Veruca Salt's father.
There you go. I have largely blacked out Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I was one of those kids traumatized by that movie. I hate to turn dark here, but I got to talk about Roy Kinnear and Richard Lester's safety standards on set. So Alexander Dumas, the original author for the Three Musketeers novel, he wrote a trilogy of what he called the D'Artagnan romances, Three Musketeers being the first one. And then the second book in the series was called 20 Years After. And Dick Lester actually adapted that 15 years after. In 1989, he came back to the Musketeers with The Return of the Musketeers, which I believe was a TV movie. And it had mostly the same cast, as much of the cast as they could get to come back, including Michael York as D'Artagnan. And they had Roy Kinnear. And on set for a scene, Kinnear was injured riding a horse. And those injuries would prove to be fatal. He would later die from those injuries. And what was bad is he didn't want to ride the horse. He was very uncomfortable with it, and Lester made him do it. And then
Wow. But I think you're making your point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of John Landis in Dick Lester. He could be very frivolous and lighthearted with the comedy and the tone. And at the same time, I think he's being a little too casual on set with safety.
You're prompt, sir. Even though you're not running. But you did hurt my shoulder.
I trust it will not inconvenience you, sir. If you wish to postpone our meeting.
By no means. I fight just as well with my left hand. If you find this places you at a disadvantage, I do apologize.
You're very courteous, sir. I was going to add, about your wound. I have an ointment of my mother's. You might...
This film did a lot of things right. One of the things that it did really well were all the sword fights. Sometimes they may have gone on a little bit too long, but they were all very well made. And it starts right from the very beginning. What did you think of these fight scenes?
I'll be honest with you. I was actually disappointed in them. They were well laid out, well shot, well choreographed. But I also felt like they were realistic in the sense of being kind of clumsy, you know. I don't know. I think I was coming in with the expectations of like an Errol Flynn swashbuckler. And that's not what we get here. So I'd wish we had gotten a different style. The impression I get is that it was realistic in the sense that showing these sword fights, you know, they're not going to be at lightning speed where they've practiced the choreography for 6 months. There's going to be awkwardness, and it's just a matter of taste, I guess, of whether if that's the approach you wish they had taken.
Now, William Hobbs, who was the choreography for these fights, he would start them off, of course, with your plastic and your wood swords. By the time they got to set, they had rehearsed it so much that they're using real steel there. So they're not using plastic. You're going to know William Hobbs from movies like The Duelist and Excalibur and Rob Roy. And all of those movies are not more the Errol Flynn style. They're very clumsy. They're very brutal. I liked that they were able to weave humor into the film. I thought that the fights were a lot of fun, and it kind of met with the style of the film, and it kind of worked into it.
So first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to Excalibur. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. That's on the short list. It's on the very top shelf. You'll never hear me say a bad word about Excalibur. As far as the humorous fights, probably my favorite scene in the whole movie is the sword fight where they're stealing food the whole time. And, they're stabbing the loaf of bread, flicking across the room, and they're hiding it under his cloak and whistling like nothing's happening. And they go through the whole fight, beating everybody, and they walk away with all the food they want to eat. I thought that was hilarious. I thought that worked extremely well.
Richard Lester really wanted to make this film earlier, back when he was making his movies with the Beatles. Now, I have to ask you this question. If you were casting the Beatles as the Three Musketeers, who would be your choice for each of the roles?
Well, the easiest and most obvious answer to that is you have to have Ringo as D'Artagnan. I think that's absolutely the slam dunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Considering the comedic approach that Lester took with this movie, and knowing what Hard Day's Night is like, I think a 1965 Three Musketeers movie with the Beatles would have been something I would have enjoyed. And I think having Ringo as D'Artagnan would have been great. And I think you make Paul Aramis, because Paul's the cute one, right? Where it gets a little bit tricky is what to do with the other two, because with this Lester film in mind and my impression of Oliver Reed's performance compared to Finley's, I think I would make John Lennon Athos in the Oliver Reed role, and I would make George Porthos. I think that's probably opposite of how those characters are traditionally defined. And so take the extrovert and the introvert. Whichever character you're going with as the introvert, I would give George that role.
Gotcha. That's a good casting. I find it very interesting that the Beatles had such an impact during that time that you had Stanley Kubrick wanting to do a Lord of the Rings films with them, the Richard Lester Three Musketeers. Were there any other roles that were maybe outside of their two films that they did make that you know of?
No, that's all I'm aware of.
Were there other versions besides the Three Musketeers that you have seen?
Yes, I have seen a few. There have been many going back to the silent film era, and they've been made on both sides of the Atlantic. So I have not seen anywhere close to all of them. I'm a huge fan of The Adventures of Robin Hood, Errol Flynn. I love that movie. It competes as the #1 movie for me of all time. And I love those huge Golden Age of Hollywood Technicolor epics. You know, you can put Ivanhoe right next to it, the one with
solid choices.
Solid. And I want there to be a Three Musketeers movie that fits in alongside those. There's not really. There is a Gene Kelly production that I believe is from the 40s. And I started to watch it one time and I couldn't finish it. It has the Musketeers in like monochromatic pastels. They kind of look like the Teletubbies when you line them all up next to each other. And it's a Gene Kelly movie, and I just couldn't really take it that seriously. I feel like when it comes to American adaptations, these Lester films are so successful that people left them alone for a long time. We did get what I called the Young Guns version in the early 90s with Kiefer Sutherland, Charlie Sheen, and Oliver Platt.
Should I watch it?
Let me put it this way. I saw it in the early 90s. I was not a kid. I was in college, and I remember liking it. I have not seen it since. I do want to watch it again, but these are very American actors that I will never forget are American. And I don't know how well it's going to hold up, but I'm interested in watching it again.
Something that you won't ever forget while you're watching Richard Lester's Three Musketeers is that these are very English musketeers.
Yes, they're not French.
Some of the French accents are questionable, maybe with the exception of the actor playing King Louis XIII, who was indeed French. Everyone else is a little suspect, but that's that suspension of disbelief, right?
Yes. And as a dumb American, I can buy an Englishman as a Frenchman a whole lot better than than I can just buy, Kiefer Sutherland or Charlie Sheen. But, I love those guys. I love their career. I do want to see that movie again. I wonder how well it actually holds up. When my son was little, we had a DVD of the Mickey, Donald, and Goofy version of Three Musketeers movie. And I have to say, I actually genuinely enjoyed that a lot. I actually thought it was very good. But I want to mention this. Yeah. The original Dumas novel which I own a copy. I have attempted to read it. It's a tough read for me. It was written in the 1800s, set in the 1600s. It is not a comedy. The novel is not comedic in tone. And it seems as though, for whatever reason, most of all the adaptations have been comedic or been lighthearted. And certainly since the Lester films. Like, I haven't seen the most recent stuff that's like BBC produced. I know there was a Musketeer film in the 2000s that was kind of like a Hong Kong action framing to it all. I haven't seen any of those, so I can't really speak with full authority, but it just seems like, for whatever reason, there's this attitude that the Three Musketeers can't be taken very seriously in film. And I wish that we would get that. I found myself frustrated by the slapstick humor in this movie. I wanted to be able to take the Musketeers seriously. And I don't think we get that. And of the movies I've seen, I still don't think I've gotten that. What I will credit the Lester films for is faithfulness to the original plot. A lot of adaptations take extreme liberties with the plot, and this kind of followed the novel, so I give it credit for that. But it just took its own tone. I would like to see something like this that was done on location, you know, real castles, you know, it's just, it looks awesome. The costumes are awesome. You have a great cast. I would like to have seen a more earnest approach. I don't think we've gotten that yet from any adaptation. I'm aware that this BBC television show that was done, I'm told that it takes like a more gritty approach. I don't necessarily know if that's accurate either, or if they're just being gritty by their own choice, but I would like to see this property treated more seriously.
All right, sir. We're kind of coming to the end of our time. Should we go ahead and ask the question?
Yes, it is time for the question.
Did the Three Musketeers groove through the decades, or did it lose its beat? David, what do you say?
I am the one who suggested this movie. I have golden childhood memories of this movie. I remember watching it and enjoying it with my dad, as I watched many swashbuckling movies with him. But I'll tell you that, again, like I touched on a second ago, that the comedic approach, I was frustrated by that more than I wasn't. I grew tired of the slapstick, and I just felt like a lot of the jokes a lot of the gags, they weren't even jokes, they were just gags. They just fell flat for me, and they just seemed unnecessary. And obviously, that was the choice, and the whole cast was behind it, and they were having fun with it, but it's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted the Musketeer movie to be. And now I can kind of zoom out, take a macro look at Richard Lester, and realize, well, you know, that's what you're going to get when you hire Richard Lester. So I'm not really blaming him necessarily. I just found myself wishing we had gotten a different treatment. I'm glad to hear that you seem to enjoy this movie a lot, and there's a lot to like. But for me, it skips a beat. I just grew weary of the slapstick humor and wish they had taken a different tone.
I am going to recognize a lot of what you just said there, because the third act gets a little wearisome. It's a travel log where D'Artagnan is going to England and coming back, and there's a long swordplay at the very end. And what makes the wrap up at the very end, basically it's this award medal scene from Star Wars that's super uplifting. And I think that Marc Legrand does a lot of heavy lifting in those final scenes. A lot of it is writing on his music. I was not expecting a comedy, and I rather appreciated that. Not that I'm super familiar with the source material to begin with. And like you, as I started to read more about Richard Lester, all of a sudden, I understood why this was more of a humorous film. So if you know that going in, it may be helpful. I found it very entertaining. It's just kind of a rip-roaring good time, as the video box says on its cover. And I went along with the ride. I enjoyed it. It grew for me.
Very good. Can I point out, and I don't know if you want to keep this in or not, but if you recall the scenes fighting in the streets in Superman 2, where like the bus is falling over and someone's walking against the wind, or the phone booth flies away, the guy's still standing there on the phone. All those visual gags, very much in the vein of Three Musketeers. Very much Dick Lester.
So see, that right there is why I do not like Superman 2.
and it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit here with Three Musketeers, to be honest.
But hey, I'm going to say, though, thank you for recommending it. I am going to follow up with watching The Fourth Musketeers. I probably will not ask you to review that because I think we're going to end up talking about the same kind of things. I'm not really sure if it's worth an episode if we're getting more of the same.
Yeah, it's the same movie. They just split it in two.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me on this swashbuckling ride. And thank you, listeners, for hopping into the Wayback Machine. Have you seen The Three Musketeers? What did you think? Was the sword fighting, did it work for you? Did the comedy take away or did it add to it? What were your memories on it? You can connect with us on our website, thecinematicflashback.com. You can actually let us know right there what you thought of The Three Musketeers. What do you think of other Richard Lester films? Pro, con, let us know. You can also read our blog articles, catch up on past episodes, and as I said, share your feedback. So don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. And join us next time as we review another film from the grooviest decade. And until then, remember, all for one and one for all.
Who brought you here?
That is the man!
Take him away.
That is not the man! That is another man altogether! This is a very honorable gentleman!